Hello everyone, I'm Santier, and welcome to another video in my Sharing My Internal Monologue and series talking about something that's been on my mind. And something that I think about every now and then is the sort of political structure of the United States. Now, I'm not talking about certain things. We'll get to it. So I'm really interested in world building and game design, and both of those tend to be very systems oriented. Game design, you're looking at systems and how they interact. Obviously, there's the little individual things inside them. But the part that I really get into is like, okay, what's the system? How's this all set up? And all that sort of thing. But also world building is looking at how do things fit together and how do these things work. And then I also have experience with programming, and that tends to be very organized, very systems driven in the way that I think about that as well. So the reason why I bring all this up is to give kind of context for how my brain works. So when I look at the United States of America government, because I am a citizen of the United States of America, it gets me thinking about, okay, what's being represented and how are these things structured? And I just kind of find it interesting to sort of examine. So we have, in the United States of America, federal government level. Now, I should say also that I'm somebody from a structural standpoint who thinks that power should be most concentrated in the smallest division. What I mean by that is I think states should have more power over citizens' lives than the federal government, and that as well the like individual counties or districts or something like that, something a bit smaller than states, should also have more power than the states individually. And the reason for this is just because the fewer number of people that the government is over, the more control those citizens can exert over that government, the more responsive it can be. And also the more localized, because needs are different in different areas. So the needs of, say, New York City are going to be different than the needs of, say, somewhere in Wyoming, or the needs in Florida, or anywhere else. So, or even like the needs from like New York City to San Francisco are going to be different. Costs of living in different places are going to be different. The cultural makeup of areas is going to be different. So different needs have different places have different needs and therefore require different solutions to their problems and the difficulties that they're running into, and have different benefits and all that sort of stuff. And it's very difficult to kind of manage that at a too high of a level just because you're working with too many pieces. But that's just kind of like a higher level structural. What I kind of wanted to more talk about was the federal government. So the federal government is broken up into three branches: the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. Of course, the executive branch is run by the President of the United States of America. And then the legislative branch, Congress, is broken into the House of Representatives, of which it is proportional from state to state based on the population, and then the Senate, where there are 2 senators per state. Now, with all of that, you'll have noticed something, which is that the representation in Congress is all geographically based. And what we've run into, and this is kind of like the fundamental thing that I find really interesting, and kind of the fundamental issue as well, is the founding fathers, are the people who put together the Constitution and these representation systems, had to deal with fundamental technological limitations. First of all, it was small. There's 13 colonies. You know, it's a much smaller space. But, and this is really critical, communication technology was kind of limited. It was like, put a dude on a fast horse. And that was your way of getting messages quickly. I mean, it preceded the telegram as far as I'm aware. Yeah, definitely. I don't remember when the telegram was invented, but even then, like even when you get the telegram, that's improving communication technology quite a lot. And then you get the telephone, you get way more places as well. So what you're running into is an issue is communication. So representation is done geographically. What do the people of this place care about? What are their needs in Virginia or New York or Pennsylvania? In any of these, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, as well as people having just stronger attachment to their states at the time. Whereas, 200 and some odd years later, flash forward to that, to now, and people are generally less invested in their states than they are in the country as a whole. And the other thing that's a huge consideration is that people are a lot more invested in their political parties than their states as well. And so a system that's designed to represent people geographically is not really well set up to represent people on a political party level. And so I think this is really a fundamental disconnect that we're kind of running into in just the structural standpoint of the way things are set up in the United States. It's set up to represent us geographically, and we want to be represented politically by a political party. And it's just not, it doesn't quite work that way. So, like, there's different solutions to this. A parliament, or at least as far as I understand the definition of a parliament, which is like a certain number of seats, and then you vote for the party that you want to represent, to have, like, to represent you, and then based upon that, it gets a proportional number of seats based upon how the votes break down. That sort of system has a lot of benefits for representing people politically, because then they're much more concerned about the party and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the geographical representation becomes more important the more powerful, like, the states are, I think. Basically, what I kind of feel like is we're in a position where everything was designed to have the states be much more powerful than they are now. The federal government has assumed a lot of power, and power has centralized over time. And representation has not followed suit, because I think that a political party-based representation system would help a lot with some of the issues that we have. Because, like, right now, we're, like, people in all of the states care who Kentucky elects or has elected to the Senate, because Mitch McConnell. And likewise, I don't know where Nancy Pelosi represents, but everybody, cares about, okay, she's the one that's been voted here. If she doesn't get reelected, that changes up the makeup. Or if Mitch McConnell doesn't get reelected, that changes up leadership fundamentally. And the part of the issue that I have also is that, like, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell are elected by individual states, and all of the other states are then kind of, like, under their control right now because of all sorts of other shenanigans that are going on. Basically, what it comes down to is we're represented at state level, and that, I think, works best if the states have more power and the federal government is less important to people's lives than it is. And if the federal government is going to continue to be as influential and as important to people's lives as it has become, then I think representation needs to change to reflect that fact and not just be geographically based. But hey, I'm curious in your opinions on this. I'm curious to hear what other perspectives are on the matter. I myself, like I said, prefer more power to be concentrated to lower levels of government for the simple reason that I think it's more responsive to citizens' needs, because there are fewer people and therefore each person's voice is amplified in proportion. But there's all sorts of things that the federal government needs to do as well. I just like strict responsibilities. I don't like it when things are, like, reaching in down from the top and going from weird angles and whatever. But that's me. That's the way my brain likes things organized. And I just don't feel like our government's well organized in terms of its influences. But, and, like, it also goes down to, like, tax structure. I might talk about that in one of these future ones. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap up here. So thank you all very much for watching. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/cntier. Until next time, everyone, take care and goodbye.